on, guys? Welcome to another episode of Bro History. Tenri Zamoda, Danny Abdel-Jabbar is here today, and we are in Jubilee right now.
Jubilation.
Right? Jubilation. Ever go to a Jubilee before?
The 4th of July. I guess that counts as a Jubilee.
Do you know what a Jubilee is?
No. What is it?
So basically, a Jubilee is just a celebration. It usually takes form in like a carnival or a fair, and they celebrate them down south. And it's where you find the real, you know what, dusty white folk is what they It's a celebration for dusty white folk. That's what Dave Chappelle calls them. But so I lived in, we'll go into this because I think we're going to talk, this is episode 100. That's what we're celebrating today.
Yep.
I'll go over my, we want to take some time today to go over what is bro history? Like, what the hell are we podcasting about? Why the hell did we start podcasting in the first place? Who the hell is Henry Zamoda? Who the hell is Danny Abdel-Jabbar? Because, as far as you guys know, we're just some guys on the internet that have conversations weekly, and we post them up for everyone to enjoy. And usually they entail things like, I don't know, from anything from the war in Yemen to
butt scratchers.
Butt scratcher. Our first sponsor was Butt Scratcher. But we wanted to just take some time to, first of all, thank everyone who's been listening and just supporting us throughout this entire process. So we started podcasting about, should we go through the entire story first, or do you want to catch up on or do you want to do the news first? Because we had some things
let's do a little bit of news just because, there's been some stuff that happened. We're just going to go real quick through two topics and then we'll jump right into our story here.
Yeah, we're going to just go over the news because we've been commenting on this and, there's been some updates. So not only are we celebrating our 100th episode, but as you guys know, or maybe not, we've commented a lot on Yemen. So the UAE is pulling out of Yemen, which is interesting news, which in my mind is pretty good news. I think they realize that war right now is a complete war of attrition. It will probably last for many, many years on, and they're done. And the UAE was a huge sponsor of that war.
Yep.
So now Saudi Arabia is basically alone.
Right.
The U.S. is backing them still, but as far as just like
probably shouldn't.
The U.S. is still backing them, but that's just like with logistics and maintenance of military equipment and selling them arms and stuff like that. So there's
data. We tell them where to bomb.
Yeah, but the U.S. isn't like engaging with troops in Yemen or anything like that. And there was reports of U.S. pilots with Saudi pilots at the beginning of the war, but I don't think that's going on anymore.
Yeah, I don't think it's there anymore either.
Yeah, I don't think that's really going on anymore. So Saudi Arabia is pretty much alone. And what you're seeing right now in Yemen is that, Saudi doesn't really have a huge army. They spend a shitload in arms. But they don't have like a really massive army. It's not a huge country when you really think about it. It's mostly desert. They don't really, they have some big population centers, but, Iran's way bigger. Other countries in the Middle East are bigger. Saudi Arabia needs to rely on hiring mercenaries really to fight their wars.
That's right.
So they resort to hiring a lot of like Sudanese mercenaries, a lot of them underage.
Mm-hmm.
And the problem with hiring mercenaries is that they're not going to fight as hard as the people who are native to the land.
Right.
Because, there's really no incentive for them to continue fighting if they're going to die.
Look at the Golden Company, They hired all the Golden Company and they died like in 2.5 seconds.
That was the biggest buzzkill of all time. Like, you hype up they didn't really hype them up that much, but they hyped them up.
I thought it was pretty hyped up because they were like, this is the best sellsword company in the world, right? And then they hit us with the first blow, no war elephants. And I'm like, fuck, that sucks. And then everybody was like, "Oh, Harry Strickland." I was doing like a fantasy Game of Thrones the whole season, and like I picked Harry Strickland because I was like, "Oh, this guy's gonna be probably pretty dope. Like he's the commander of the Golden Company. Like he's probably gonna wreck shit." Dies immediately. Sucked. I was very disappointed.
Did you see those goofy uniforms they had?
Yeah, where they tucked in their shirts and shit. So stupid.
The Golden Company was. I thought they were supposed to be.
High-waisted pants.
I literally thought that we were gonna see a battle like a Hannibal versus um I'm forgetting the Roman general's name. I guess he wasn't even really fighting them until the end of the war when all the elephants died. But like a Rome slash Carthage battle.
Carthage.
Carthage. As you all know, I suck at pronouncing easy words. But it's interesting that. So back to Saudi Arabia. It's interesting. They're in it alone now. So, I mean, I have to think with the pressure from the U.S. Congress, because the Congress is pretty fed up with it. The world community is fed up with it. I think they're going to have to work something out pretty damn soon. Yeah, they can probably last, years to come just because there's so much money involved there. But the Houthis, like they recently displayed like a bunch of cruise missiles that they had,
right?
getting weapons.
Right. Drones, apparently.
They're getting drones.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they're buying them from the black market. Allegedly, they're getting from Iran, which more and more likely seems like it's probably true because, I mean, I know that I've debunked stuff about Iran giving them weapons at some times, but it seems like they probably would be doing it now because, like, more so now if they could, because, like, why not? Like,
because it's winding down and shit like that,
It's not just that because, like, Saudi is so wind down in this, like, why not just throw them a bone every once in a while? And that's exactly what Gregory Gauss said. Gregory Gauss I interviewed, I think in January, 6 months ago about, we spoke about MBS and like his rise to power in Yemen. And he is one, people call him the leading expert on Saudi Arabia, on Arabian politics. Like he's an absolute authority. And we had a conversation. He said that basically the situation with the Houthis in Iran is that the Houthis want to be Iran. They want to be a proxy of Iran more than Iran wants to be there, like that, more than Iran wants them. So Iran just kind of throws them a bone every once in a while because they know how much Saudi is spending. And that's kind of like the relationship. And I tend to take his word more than anyone on the subject matter. But yeah, I think that's good news that UAE is pulling out.
Yeah.
I think I think it's really immoral to hire child soldiers. Not all of those Sudanese mercenaries are child soldiers. Some of those mercenaries are actually, extremist in the Arabian Peninsula. So it's,
in any case, it's a good thing for the Yemenis people because the sooner this war winds down, the faster that they can get back to like some semblance of normalcy, with their lives. We talked a little bit about how there was so much famine and so much cholera outbreaks and things like that happening there. So it'll take a minute to rebuild and it'll take a minute to get things back to normal. But the UAE pulling out, that basically means that, in my opinion, that this should be coming to a close soon.
Yeah, I think you're right. All right, so let's turn to Yemen because we want to get to the bro history stuff. But there's one more news story that we wanted to discuss, and that was for the S-400s.
That's right. As you know, if you've been listening for a while, we talk a lot about military technology. The S-400 surface-to-air missile system is a Russian-built surface-to-air missile system that's arguably the best in the world at what it does. There's been a lot of controversy recently surrounding Turkey for these missile systems because they're deciding to purchase them. And what's so controversial about it is that Turkey is a part of NATO, right? NATO uses basically American stuff, right? And the one really big issue that could arise is that we have this brand new F-35, jet fighter, of which Turkey has pledged to purchase many. I think it's something like 100, right? And they already have a few. They already made their first orders. And the question is, whether or not the Russians can gain valuable intelligence about the F-35 vis-a-vis, their sale of these S-400 systems to Turkey. See, when they sell these systems to any country, by the way, also Saudi Arabia is going to be buying them too. They don't just say, here you go, figure it out, right? They come over, they train people up. I know that recently in Syria, they were training them on the S-400 systems, and I know that they have some S-200 systems as well. So basically they help them set it up, they help them get trained up on it. They obviously have to translate the language of the programs to the target language so that they can read the thing. But like it's a very involved process, and these S-400 systems include a ton of radar and a ton of other like intelligence gathering devices that if an F-35 was flying around in the area, in the airspace, when they were testing these S-400 systems, it is possible that a Russian intelligence operative that was helping to set up Turkey's S-400 system could gain some insights about vulnerabilities of the craft, or like how to find it on radar. Because remember, F-35 is supposed to be a stealthy plane, right? This is supposed to be like, you can't catch me, you can't see me, super small radar crosshairs, cross-section, excuse me. So, it's pretty interesting. And Turkey being a NATO country makes it even more even more like scandalous because they probably should be using our weapon systems. Turkey claps back on this one particularly because they're saying that the U.S. was slow to provide an adequate surface-to-air missile system that would be compatible with the rest of their air defense grid. So they just went ahead and purchased what they thought was the best system. And like honestly, I don't blame them because the S-400 is pretty dope. But it's kind of a thumb in the nose at the U.S. Erdogan is, at least by going through with this plan, and it's happening. Whether you like it or not, it's going to happen. And they already have our F-35s anyway, so we could cancel the order with them. But Trump, he likes to sell weapons to people who will buy them. Anyone.
Trump's mentality is like, how do you not see this mentality? These Muslims hate these Muslims. Why aren't you selling them these weapons with the Muslims? Like, I think that's kind of like his mentality in a nutshell. He's just so transactional.
Yeah.
But another interesting thing, I know we weren't even supposed to talk about it. I don't want to spend too much time on this, but I just found it really interesting. Besides Yemen and Turkey, so China's threatening to put sanctions on the U.S. China is threatening to put sanctions on the U.S. for because the U.S. just approved $2.2 billion in arms sales to Taiwan. Did you hear about that?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah.
Yeah, that's going to be a funny thing to deal with. I don't want to go too much into it because I haven't researched it too much. I've just read a couple of like articles in Al Jazeera about it. Mm-hmm. But that's something in the future that we're probably going to touch because that's a funny
trade war. Somewhat related to it, I think they were willing to concede on some like trade war issues. China was willing to concede on some trade war issues if the U.S. would like shut the fuck up about supporting Hong Kong and that extradition law that's going through that caused those massive riots. And apparently we've placated on that one. So we've been getting much more quiet about that issue. Our government isn't talking about it at all anymore. So it's interesting the way that this plays out. It's like, we have a trade deficit, so I'm going to slap you with some tariffs. And then China's like, oh, word, well, I'm going to slap you with some tariffs. And then, some shit goes down in Hong Kong and like we're, basically waving our finger at China. And China's like, all right, well, we'll stop doing some tariffs if you stop talking about it. And then U.S. is like, okay. And then now we're talking about Taiwan and the U.S. approves an arms deal with Taiwan because why wouldn't Trump want to sell weapons to anyone? And then China's like, well, I'm putting the tariffs back on. So, it's kind of a back and forth crazy ass situation. I'd love to go over it more.
Yeah. And for people who don't know, China doesn't consider Taiwan a state.
Taiwan is China, according to China.
According to China, Taiwan is China. So Trump is just selling weapons to China, right? Isn't that how it works?
Yeah.
I think it's like most countries don't consider them a state. It's like, I think only like 20 countries consider Taiwan an actual country.
Right.
But enough about that. Enough about the war stuff. I wanted to start off with Yemen, because I think that's an overall good thing. Wanted to have some positivity in people's lives. Obviously, there's so many other things that we could probably talk about relating to some other things, like the tanker that was seized by or not seized. Excuse me, the tanker. The British claims that Iran tried to seize a tanker and then kind of brushing it off, saying it was no big deal, which was kind of weird.
Mm-hmm.
But we're not going to do that. We're going to talk about bro history today, because we've been doing this for almost a year now.
That's right.
We started podcasting in August. Well, this podcast, as you know it, is we started podcasting in August.
Mm-hmm.
And I kind of wanted to go over the history of bro history, who we are as people, because you guys should probably know who's giving you this information, right? And then, what is just some, I don't know, anything to add to that?
Some fun facts. Let's start way back though, because we might have started this podcast proper, in August of 2018, but bro history's roots go back quite a bit more than that. And I know we kind of discussed this previously, but do you want to talk about, where this really kicked off, back in 2016?
Yeah, absolutely. So bro history was an idea that I had one day while I was working from home. I was just like, it just spurred into my brain. I don't know what happened. It was like divine intervention. God gave me this name. God gave me this name, bro history. He's like, the burning bush went off, and I was like possessed by it. And actually, it wasn't that bro history first. It was history bro.
History bro.
And I went online. I was like, I need to do something with history bro. Like, history bro wasn't available as a domain name. So bro history was a suggestion. I was like, bro history is even better. So I bought bro history. And then along with I went on an entire rampage of buying domain names that same day. So
yeah, I've been on those.
Another domain name I purchased was I still own this, PeruvianFluteMusic.com.
Nice. You're going to put something up on that.
I own PeruvianFluteMusic.com. Do not ask me why I decided to buy that. I just said, I wonder if PeruvianFluteMusic.com is available. I should buy it. I do love Peruvian flute music, and I do love Peruvian flute music. It's the most peaceful, majestic music in the entire world.
I once bought whackarnolds.com. It was around the same time too. I never did anything with it, and it lapsed, so it's available on the market if anyone wants to buy whackarnolds.com.
For whatever reason. What is that even from?
From Chappelle Show. Remember when he was working at the McDonald's?
Oh yeah, I remember that. Yeah. I do remember that. That's hilarious.
Whack Arnold's is helping out this community.
That's hilarious. A really funny troll thing that happened. So for those of you who watch or who follow Joe Rogan, which I'm sure is a lot, his initial co-host, who still contributes on his show a lot, Brian Redbin, he purchased Diet Pepsi or Pepsi1.com, some new Pepsi soda, the domain,
and just sat on Pepsi, it, and he bought it on it,
and then Pepsi came on, and he started doing a blog on it, saying it was like the Pepsi challenge, where he would drink, I think it was like Pepsi One or something like that, and he would buy the Pepsi and drink it every single day, only Pepsi. Like, it was like, I'm going to see what happens after 30 days of only drinking Pepsi. And he was blogging about it. He wasn't actually doing it. It was like a troll. Mm-hmm. And he was like, oh, I'm getting sick. I'm not feeling so good. And obviously Pepsi was freaking out. So I'm not sure what agreement they reached, but
they probably paid him millions of dollars for the domain.
It's just a funny troll.
Yeah.
But all right, back to the history, bro history. So yeah, I got this domain name, and at first, the first thing I wanted to do with it was just make a blog. So I was just writing. I had brohistory.com. I'd put some shitty blogs up about history. I can't even really recall the things I wrote about, just kind of standard stuff, the biggest battles in the Pacific type stuff. Mm-hmm. And eventually, I was always really into podcasting. I was always, let me give you a background of my history expertise. I don't even know if I do. I don't know if you would consider it a history expertise, but I've always been really interested in history. It's been my passion. Like since I was like 5, I was just a history nut. I used to
I
love,
used to love social studies class.
yeah, I love social studies class. I used to look forward to social studies class every single day, and I just had a really intense passion for it. Pretty much everything related to political science and history, I really, really enjoyed that course of study. And when I was younger, you could pretty much name, I was really interested in samurais and Japanese history and
Who
medieval
wasn't? Right.
history, Roman history. Obviously, most young boys love World War II history. And I just was a history nut. So I wanted to, maybe turn that into a side hustle or something in the future. And then I started listening to podcasts around that same time. I never really listened to podcasts before 2016. I listened to
Oh yeah.
Dan Carlin's podcast. And I think the first one I listened to was The Prophets of Doom, which is all about the Protestant Reformation. It was all about just like this insane story about how Anabaptists, which was like kind of an extreme offshoot of the Reform, how they
Reformists, right?
extreme reformist in Germany that ended up taking over an entire city called Munster, and the local king or prince bishop had to put the city under siege. And it was just all this fucking crazy stuff that was going on.
He had to put his city under siege or sage?
Siege.
Oh, because that brings up like a funny, like he's like wafting around sage around the city.
All right. Siege. So he had to put the city under siege, and it was just like this ridiculous story about like sex involved, and this guy who was leading the Anabaptist was like basically a cult leader who was convincing, who like made rules where he had to sleep with everyone's wives and things like that. It was just a juicy story. So I recommend that podcast if you've never listened to it. But I got really into Dan Carlin stuff. He put out, in college, I was a big World War. I took a really great class. I had a really great professor in college, a history professor, who did this class on World War I. And ever since I was just like obsessed with World War I. I just loved reading about World War I. And Dan Carlin released a podcast called The Blueprint for Armageddon, which is like 36 hours long. It's like in like 6 episodes or so. It might even be longer. This thing was just mind-blowing to me. I couldn't believe like this form of media existed, and I had never really listened to it before. So I got hooked on all of Dan Carlin's stuff, and like just like podcasting was the only form of media that I consumed at that time. Like I just was like, I don't need anything else. Podcasting was the only thing I like.
No music, no movies, no TV, podcasts.
No, really, it really was like that. Like I stopped watching. I barely watch any television now. I barely watch. That's the main form of media I consume, which is podcasting.
Podcast and chill.
So I wanted to do a bro history podcast, and I was pretty insecure about doing it before. I will give you a little nugget of knowledge. When I was younger, I had a lot of speech problems. I had a lot of problems with like pronunciation. You could probably realize that by this podcast. I just made several mistakes pronunciating words, but I used to have really severe problems just like verbally communicating when I was younger. So I had to take years of speech therapy. I had like a lisp. I had a really bad, I had a really hard time just like expressing myself verbally as a young child. So I was kind of self-conscious because I knew in the back of the head, I still really had, these are problems that I actually have to continue working on. Like, it's not something that is like gone, you know what I mean? I have to I need to still be conscious of how I speak. So, I was really self-conscious about doing it at first, but I just like loved it so much. And I had so many ideas and so many projects I wanted to work on, and as far as like producing audio media. And I told Danny, and Danny and I had met at a company that we worked with, and Danny and I think we instantly just became really close friends. Like
Yep.
the day we met. Danny had been at the company for 6 months prior to me or so, and we uh, I immediately knew that Danny was a great guy, and I'll tell you, and I'm just going to highlight how awesome of a person Danny is. I was like it was like my first couple of weeks at that job, and I was having a really, really difficult time with a client, and every single supervisor, every manager in the company was gone. And Danny stayed like 2 hours after work, like helping me with this guy. And I was like, why is he helping me? There's no reason for him to help me. Like, he doesn't have any stakes in this. And I was like, and Danny was just like, yeah, I'll help you. And he just stayed after work and helped me. And I was like, man, you're the best guy in the world. So Danny and I became really close friends after that. We always like had super insightful conversations about like politics and really just everything.
Mm-hmm.
So we came from when I like started doing bro history, I wanted to, I come from the right, as you guys know, at least, origin wise, I don't like the label. I don't really like labels anymore, but I know at that time I definitely considered myself kind of, right wingish, libertarian-ish. So I was like, well, Danny's more along the left. I think it would be a lot better to speak to Danny and do a podcast with somebody who I have really good conversations and civil discourse with, and things that we disagree and things that we agree with. I'd rather do it with somebody who's like not going to be, on the same line with me on that, like my opinion, so we can have discourse. And so I told Danny was instantly interested.
Yep.
And Danny was like, yeah, man, I'm down to do it. That sounds like an awesome idea.
Yeah. And the name really hooked it too. I was like, bro history, that's fucking genius.
Yeah. And at that time, was it like 2016 or so? It was before Trump was elected. We were talking about this. That's when all of those like new political commentators started coming out. Like when those alt media political commentators came out, a lot of them from the right wing. So like Ben Shapiro started getting really big at that time.
I think the Blaze was coming up at the time.
The Blaze, Steven Crowder was getting really big. Just name a person who's like has a really big following now. That's in 2015, 2016 is when their careers on the internet really started. But the last thing I wanted to do was have like a circle jerk of like my own political projections. Like I didn't want to like talk to somebody and do like, oh, liberals are stupid. Oh, like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like that was the last thing I wanted to do. I thought that would just be so corny. There were so many people just doing like the whole, either I hate Trump so much he is the devil, or I hate liberals so much they are just,
Hillary Clinton's emails.
Like I didn't want to like have a circle jerk of my own political ideology. I wanted to, put the podcast. I wanted to create a podcast where, I was always in a position to learn from somebody else. So Danny was perfect. We started doing the podcast at his apartment.
Oh man,
God!
We gotta. Well, before we get into that, because that's hilarious, we gotta point out that like we wanted to be apolitical for a minute. Like we wanted to go full force on history, and even before it was a podcast, we were thinking about doing a website on brohistory.com that was like a quasi urban dictionary, except for history. Like you could go on it and like submit like, oh, George Washington murdered a bunch of Hessians on, Christmas, and like talk about history that way. That went nowhere because we definitely didn't have the technical capabilities to pull that off. And also, growing a user base for that would have been ridiculous. So I think what we landed on was we wanted to talk about our favorite historical, pieces. We wanted to because there was so many pundits out there online, basically doing their, political commentary. We wanted to like provide something fun and refreshing that we like, right? You and I, Henry, we love history. We're students of history. We love, learning about the interesting little details of the historical record, and kind of doing a little bit of a retelling, but in a way that wasn't fucking boring, right? In a way that wasn't, pontificating. It was just like a couple bros sitting down, talking about something that we've done some research on, and talking about it like as if you would talk to somebody in a bar or like, for a cup of coffee, and that's kind of where we started. And we wanted to, kind of garner this show to be that kind of outlet for, hey, there's a lot of stuff going on right now, but like, we also want to pay attention to our history so that it doesn't repeat itself, and that, so we're aware of the context of where our political conversations come to today. Eventually we've morphed into, covering more geopolitics and more, current events. But I think what's pretty important is that we laid a lot of groundwork in the beginning, talking about the history of a lot of things. You mentioned early in the show that, we've been talking a lot about Yemen, but, we've done episodes, long episodes on like the history of the Saudi Empire, or like the how World War I and World War II kind of set the stage for a lot of these, Middle East crises, so, and we're always bringing it back to the history. And I think that's super important. That's what I really like about this show, even though we might talk a lot about like current events.
Yeah. And another thing that we wanted to make sure that we were adding was like a good amount of just casual flow, because I don't want to talk badly of other history podcasts, but I'll just be frank. A lot of them are just, they're read off scripts.
Mm-hmm.
Like they're pre-written. They're released, once a week or so, maybe once a month. The Dan Carlin one is not one of these podcasts, by the way.
Yeah, Dan Carlin's podcast is a masterpiece.
It's like something. It's the best. I think he's the best narrator in the world. So a lot of history podcasts are pre-written. They're read off scripts, and frankly, a lot of them are read off Wikipedia, or they're plagiarized from books. And I'm not trying to like talk shit. Like a lot of them do just straight up plagiarize. Like they'll just read a chapter from a book and they won't even cite it. So I'm not going to name names at podcasts that do
no
it.
Doxing.
But we were like, we rather just like fucking bullshit. Like we would talk to somebody at a bar. Like one time I was talking to a dude. I was just talking to a bunch of my friends from the gym, and we we just like got into a conversation about like the worst type of torture, and
Mm-hmm.
we were just like openly in the floor of the gym. We were like, well, I was like, the ancient Persians used to put people out on a boat, sandwiched it between the boat, and put honey on them so they would be eaten. And like, we're just like that. We wanted that type of environment where it would be fun, and maybe you would learn something without, having to be, forced to
listen to a history textbook, basically.
Yeah. And we, neither of us are professional historians,
right.
Neither of us are professional anything besides, what we've done for a
bro
living.
Historians.
But I would say that at the very least, we have a pretty strong knowledge and passion for it. And I think I could call myself an amateur historian in some
Sure.
regards.
I would put you above that, but I like the modesty there.
So what happened is that we're going to do the podcast. Let's meet up. We met at Danny's place, and should I tell the story about this?
Yeah,
podcast?
definitely.
Right. So first of all, no offense to Danny. No offense to Danny. Or not to Danny. So Danny's dog, the dog story, T-Rex. This is the first thing that jumped out. So we went to Danny's place. We were recording. Danny's dog is, I think, the 7-time winner of the world's ugliest dog contest.
No, he's not.
Is 10 times winner? How old is T-Rex? He must have won every single year he's been alive. T-Rex, Danny's dog, first of all, let's set the stage. Danny's dog is the ugliest dog on the face of the universe.
He absolutely is not. I vehemently disagree.
It looks like it doesn't even look like a species of dog. It looks kind of like, it kind of looks like just a black fuzz of like rabies infested. And not only does it look like a feral just animal that would come from a sewer, I'm sorry for shitting on T-Rex. I have to. The dog also has a terrible personality. It's like, she sucks. She's not that good looking, but she has a great personality. This dog doesn't have a great personality. It barks It always looks like it's on some type of like Resident Evil style, like Red Eye or whatever. The injection thing was in Resident Evil. It always looks like it's possessed by something that's even a higher grade than rabies. So it just barks. It screams like it's really loud. And while we were trying to record this podcast, first of all, I'm stuttering. This is the first time I've ever talked into a microphone, into a computer. I'm like, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, so my name. Let's start again. Like, this is me. Like, my name's Henry. All right, let's start again. This is bro. Fuck. We'll start again. Like that. That was basically my mentality. I just couldn't get it out. And then the dog's like, I was like, and then it starts biting its tail. Running around in circles, like, because it's just an insane dog, and I'm just like, oh, this is crazy. I don't even know what the fuck we talked about in that first podcast.
I don't either. I don't even remember.
Zero clue what we did, and we did that, and I think that was 2016 or 2017. Was that a year?
I think it might have been 17. Yeah, it might have been 17.
So we kind of like never did it again after that for a while. We were like, yeah, well, I guess. And I was thinking, I'm like, maybe this thing isn't for me. And then last year, so we went a full year without like even talking about bro history, I think. And we started, I was like, man, I really want to do this podcast. Like I've been wanting to do it for so long. Like I need to try it at least. So I was at my grandfather's house, who lives in Virginia Beach, whatever, who lives down in Virginia. And we were going to, I was just like in like the attic, and I was like, fuck it. I have a microphone. I have my computer. I'm just going to record into GarageBand. Whatever I say right now, I'm putting out as the first episode of Bro History. So, like, I just recorded. I was just like, hey, my name's Henry. This is Bro History. Welcome to an episode that will be about, well, who knows what. It's just like, just talking. Just talking like nonsense. And I put that out, and then that was the first episode. I was like, all right, well, I did one. Now I got to build on it. So I think we got Danny came along. I think you had the second or third episode, or I forget which one you first came along. The first episode that you came on was a debate, because I did a podcast with my friend Judah. And Judah is Judah probably has a lot of different views than I do on a lot of different subjects. And, we've talked, and Danny heard, we were talking about Israel. And Judah is, he's Jewish, and has a very strong affinity for Israel. And, we were talking about Palestine, and then Danny came on to talk about, he came on to like do a debate with him, and it was like a very, very civil debate. I mean, Judah's a great guy. And we did a very civil debate on Israel Palestine, and
probably the most civil debate I've heard on the topic, like ever.
Yeah, so we did that, and so we were like, oh, we can do politics and like kind of world issues too, and we kind of built on that from there. We kept on doing we kept on doing more shows on geopolitics, and I started just like reaching. I was like, I need to get guests on here. So I like basically started just taking books out of my shelf, and I started emailing the authors of the books.
Robert Fitz was the first.
Robert Fitz was our first interview, not about politics whatsoever.
Right.
It was strictly a history podcast about the 1934 World Baseball Classic, because I'm a big sports fan. I never really talk about sports on the show, but I'm a big Yankee fan, so we did a podcast on the 1934 Baseball Classic in Japan, and Mo Brooks, and how he was a spy, or how he was allegedly a spy. Completely, not taboo topics type of thing. Robert Fitz is great. We built on that. I got the next person I interviewed was Dan Flores. Who was like cool. Dan Flores, who is I guess a wildlife historian would be his title, and he is like one of the big ones in the world. He's always on Joe Rogan. And I just emailed him out of the blue, and I'm like, will you be on my podcast, please? I have a history podcast. And he's like, yeah, sure, right on. And he was on. I interviewed Dan Flores, So it just
We had a go ahead.
oh yeah, it just cascaded from there into just a podcast that was, a combination of just like friends talking to each other about just anything history related or politics related. And yeah, I mean, that's really kind of the origin story of it. We got into serious politics when we I've talked enough for actually right now. Why don't you add some context, because there's a freaking dog barking.
T-Rex? No, yeah, it's spun off from there. I think we've had some really, really awesome people on, in addition to just the commentary that we provide. And I think, I'm frankly really surprised, and I want to give you particularly a shout out at how many awesome people you've been able to get on the show just by reaching out. Like you talked about a couple already, but if you remember, one of my favorite ones was our episode on Blitzed History in the Third Reich, and that's by Norman Ohler, who is a New York Times bestseller. And we talked all about how much drugs the Nazis did, and this was it really tickled me a little bit because I'm a German studies major in college, and this is like a really great author. Read his book in like a day in preparation for this, and it was really great. I mean, we've had so many other people on since then. I mean, we've had Major Danny Jerson. We've had Jose Nino. We've had. I'm trying to like look through all the list of people that we had on.
We've had a lot of people. We've had Robert Zubrin on.
Right.
The
Scott
Mars
Horton.
Scott Horton's been on a couple times. Roy Casagrande has been on a couple times.
Mm-hmm.
We have Danny Jerison, who I think he'll be coming on soon again.
Oh, and we can't forget Senator Black.
Yeah. Then we started doing so. I guess the big thing is, somewhere along the line, we went from doing a standard history podcast and we ended up being like political commentators. Was that our intention? I don't know. It just really evolved from that. And honestly, when we started doing more political commentary, not on really so much domestic stuff, like, this is not the podcast that you're going to come on and see, Danny's a liberal, you can call me whatever. I don't even know what to call me anymore. If
we'll get into that.
A political Martian, whatever. I like what Dan Carlin says, political Martian.
Yeah.
It just somehow evolved into just a podcast that comments mostly on global events. And we just, one of the reasons is that it's easier to churn out content when you have like a current event to work with. I'll be completely honest right there. And we didn't want to sit and like not podcast, because one of the big things you need to do to get better at podcasting is podcast,
Right.
So we didn't want to work on like doing not coming, I don't want to say not coming prepared, but we didn't want to like do hundreds of hours of research
for an hour-long episode.
Hour-long episode. We wanted to just podcast and continue working on it and doing research as we go. We both, I've been, I personally comment a lot on two subjects, I would say, that I really comment on. One being Saudi Arabia, and the other being the war in Syria. Those are two things that I comment quite a lot on. We do also, I'm beginning to comment a lot more. We're both starting to comment a lot more on Iran, more so together. But I personally comment a lot on the war in Syria, and I comment a lot on Arabian Peninsula stuff. And I just did that because I don't know. Am I talking too much?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a really good context. I mean, we both have our areas of interest, right? So where you are like really into geopolitics and specifically in the Middle East, I think my areas of expertise happens to be around like military tech and technology surrounding history and current events, right? So, I've had, starting from that Sherman Takes and Bat Bombs episode that we recently posted, I've always had an interest in like how weapons of war change the tides of history. And like, we've done so many episodes on that, and that's kind of evolved into just all of the tech that surrounds a lot of these issues in current events. Like very recently, we had a pretty long discussion on those oil tankers, that got blown up in the Straits of Hormuz, and we were talking about limpet mines and all this other stuff. I mean, like that's my area of expertise, and I think we kind of synthesize both of our sides, from the historical perspectives, and the technical perspectives, from the right and the left, and we take it and we have a conversation about it. And it turns into this kind of awesome show that we've been running for 100 episodes now. And I think that's really, really awesome.
Yeah. And I think it's important to note that, man, what was I going to say? I lost my train of thought. Like, we try not to tackle subjects in the lens of like a political spectrum, but like it's hard to divorce yourself from your politics. I'll be completely honest. Right. So obviously that comes through when we debate. When we do, like when we talk about politics, typically we talk about it. We purposely talk about politics that we disagree with together, instead of it being a circle jerk. Like, we don't want to make like a progressive circle jerk, a libertarian circle jerk, a conservative circle jerk. Like, that's easy, man. Like, you can do a podcast with your friends who agree on 95% of the issues with you, and then just be like, oh yeah, the government sucks, blah 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 blah, or man, we need universal basic health care, blah 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 blah,
taxation is theft.
Blah, blah, blah. Like, you can do that easy. Like, and I'd rather be challenged for things that I have strong conviction on. We even do that on policy that I've said some outlandish things on this podcast. I'm very aware of that. I've made some very grand statements. Most of them being about Syria. And I do that knowing that Danny will push back on whatever I say. And we can have a discussion about it, rather than me just going on and being like, globalist evildoers are manipulating everything behind the scenes. And like, I don't want to do that. Yeah. So, I mean, hopefully that show kind of we're representing that. Representing that type of style of show where it's casual, where we're not trying to like cater to a political opinion or political ideology. Like, we want it to we want to have an open, an open conversation, wherever you fall in the political spectrum.
I think that's a really good segue for an exercise that we did yesterday.
Yeah.
So I'll introduce this, and then we can talk a little bit about where we stand. So my roommate, I came home from work one day, and he was like, "Oh, you got to go on isidewith.com and like just take the political quiz." I'm like, "What is this, fucking BuzzFeed or some shit?" It's actually pretty interesting. It's a website that asks you some basic, political questions for folks here in the United States. Sorry for those folks that are outside. You can still take it and see which American, politician you line up with, but I don't know how helpful that would be for you. And basically, I took the test and I found it super interesting. And I thought it would be kind of fun to take this test with Henry, because as he points out, like, we don't agree on a lot of things. So we did it. We recorded it yesterday. And it's Patreon only content. So if you're really curious about like our stances on really specific issues, you'll have to join us there on Patreon to check it out. But I thought it might be fun for our 100th episode to kind of go over like how different we are politically, and at the same time how the same, like the places that we intersect a lot. And I figured we'd start by just going over our results from the I side with, and talk about how epically wrong we think they are. But yeah, let's start from there. I know that you got a really funny like top candidate for you that you probably wouldn't vote for.
Oh my God. So we took this test, and you go through these different issues and it says who you would vote for. And I got Gary Johnson. And I was like, what the fuck? Gary Johnson? I'm seriously, I said, I got Gary Johnson. And I'll just give you some background. So yeah, libertarian-esque, whatever. I did not vote for Gary Johnson. last election.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't vote for him because I thought that he was an awful representation of libertarianism. I thought he was, I really disliked him. And I'm sure he's a nice guy in real life, but like, the topics he talked about, his lack of knowledge in so many areas.
Mm-hmm.
The guy just answered so many questions incorrectly that you would want if you were a libertarian, or at least somebody who is sympathetic to those ideas, like things like a, the case about the gay wedding cakes.
Yeah.
I take the position, and I'll just
the wedding cakes weren't gay themselves. It was for
like you should be able to. I believe in voluntary freedom to choose who you do business with, regardless of whatever reason you have.
Mm-hmm.
And Gary Johnson said that the bakers should be forced to make a gay wedding cake, even though that they're Christians. And then someone followed up. It's like, well, would Jewish people be forced to make a cake for a Nazi? And he said, yes, Jewish people would be forced to make cakes for a Nazi. And I was like, dude, you sound like you just, like, not only did you just alienate yourself from everyone who would be like a right-wing libertarian, but you'd also just alienated everyone from yourself. Everyone who would be a left wing.
Yeah.
Like, you just said the dumbest answer. First of all, you got the answer wrong as far as like what most libertarians would believe in. And second of all, you did it in the most like untactful, dumbest PR stricken way. And then the other thing that obviously comes to mind is that he had zero clue what was going on foreign policy wise.
Yeah.
Didn't know, like the average commenter on Reddit knew a lot more about foreign policy than Gary Johnson. Like that's how out of the dark he was about what was going on. I don't think
at least that's how he represented himself.
That's how he represented himself.
Like, he definitely did not do a good job like explaining the fact that he knew things.
I think the average politician probably doesn't know that much about what's going on in Middle Eastern wars or really just global affairs. I think the average politician does have gaps of knowledge, but I think that Gary Johnson's didn't have a gap of knowledge. I think he had a lack of any perspective whatsoever, based off some of the things that he said about Syria, not knowing where Aleppo was, just getting so many things like not knowing where Aleppo was, not knowing what Aleppo was. Hillary Clinton was the one who didn't know where Mosul was when she was on the Armed Service Committee, and Mosul was like the biggest hot spot of ISIS ever. And she didn't know where it was located. You think that you'd know where it was. She said it was on the border of Iraq and Syria when it's about 70, 80 miles into Iraq. But obviously not every politician is going to get that. But when you're Secretary of State, when you're on the Armed Service Committee, I expect you to know exactly where those cities are.
Right.
I just did not like him. So I was disappointed by that. So it was like 80% Gary Johnson. I didn't even know that he was running for the libertarian president because I thought it was based off current presidents. I thought Adam Kokesh, actually, I really don't know who's running for president on the Libertarian Party except Adam Kokesh. That's the only one I know.
I think it's also because like there was you could like match with like Vermin Supreme, like, so I think it's just like pulling all the most recent ones in the event that they do run. I think it's a little early for some of these third parties to declare because they wouldn't be doing like nominations, right? They're just, I could be wrong about this, but like does the Green Party particularly have like a
I'm sure they do. They honestly showed what made it difficult was they showed every single political party like that ever existed in the United States. So it got a little overwhelming. I was expecting them to like line us up with one out of the 700,000 people running for the Democratic election or Donald Trump.
Right.
But like,
you scored pretty low on Donald Trump, though.
I was surprised.
Yeah.
So I scored Gary Johnson number 1, 80%. I think I scored Andrew Yang number 2.
Andrew Yang came up really high for you.
I was really surprised at Andrew Yang because I didn't think I answered any of the questions that would like bring me to Yang, but I mean, whatever. It's better.
$1,000 a month for everyone.
There could be worse. The person who I've been praising a lot through this podcast has been Tulsi Gabbard, dude.
Right.
This is on foreign policy. You guys know that I'm pretty. I don't want to say dovish, but I'm pretty anti-interventionist as far as like my views on foreign policy. Yes, you can be an anti-interventionist and be on the right. People get like blown away by that.
Right.
They're like, what? You are an anti-interventionist and you are like, you consider yourself like, you don't agree. You're an anti-interventionist and you also believe in less business regulations at the same time. Like, that's insane. You need to be one or the other. Like, so many people expect you to have that basic bitch perspective on everything, where you're either a Democrat or Republican on every single issue. That's like absurd. Like, you need to have nuance.
There's no nuance in that, right?
Like, there's no nuance. It's like, that's tribalism. It's the pure definition of tribalism.
Yeah.
There was a funny thing that went on. I just kind of heard about it vaguely, about some guy who was on a ticket for the Republican Party in like, I forget what state. But it comes to mind because there was a guy who was like a convicted sex offender on the ticket, and he still got like 30% of the vote.
These nuts.
I don't know who it was, but it was just like out of pure tribalism. No, I don't think that the people voting for him knew that he was a convicted sex offender.
They just voted down the ticket.
Just voted down the ticket.
Yeah.
I mean, Roy Moore. Roy Moore, he lost the Senate seat.
Thank God.
It wasn't
but he got a lot of votes, though.
You got a lot of votes, and that guy was straight up throwback to the 15th century.
Yeah.
I don't know if there was a time in America that existed that Roy Moore had popular opinions in. That guy was just like the worst Republican candidate I have ever seen in years.
But I mean, like, to that point, he got a lot of votes.
But
he got a lot of votes, and I think that's just like voting down the party line, and that's that's kind of where I had some frustration with this I side with, because there was a lot of questions, like a lot of different questions on domestic policy, foreign policy, environment, healthcare, you name it, and you can pick like the yes or the no. But there were like more nuanced answers, and like even some of those, I was just like, this isn't nuanced enough, right? And I was like, yes, I know a specific person that would have said exactly this answer, and no, I don't fully agree with this answer, but this is the closest I can get to where I fall. And it's funny because like I got different answers at different times I did it, but I matched up with Elizabeth Warren, which is great. You know, I like her. I think she's fine. I don't know if I'd vote for her today, but it was fine. But I also got ranked pretty high in Kirsten Gillibrand, who I would never vote for.
Yeah, me too. I was ranked like Gillibrand was like number 3 for me, and I would never even.
I wouldn't consider her. You know, so
I forget that she's running half the time. The other, and she's a New York senator.
Yeah,
I forget she's running, and it was weird that she popped up.
Super weird. And I think it was a fun exercise to do with you specifically, because there were some issues where we're like, yep, I'm going to go hard no. And I'd be like, oh, I'm going hard yes. Right. And we'd completely disagree and have a little debate about it. But there was this gap in the middle. I forget what the specific topic is. It might've been foreign policy and like anti-interventionism, but we were just like hard no, hard no, hard no. And we were lining up, like we blew through like probably 15 questions, exactly the same answers. And it was fun to like see like where we meet in the middle. I really like that exercise. I thought it was cool.
Well, spoiler alert, it was like the issues dealing with, there was never actually a question about regime change on it. There was only questions about like, should the U.S. have authority to go to war without Congress type.
Right. Or like, should the U.S. assassinate suspected terrorists or something absolutely ridiculous.
Suspected terrorist, you know,
like assassinate suspected terrorists. It's like, no.
Should the U.S. be able to assassinate whoever they want? That's basically what it was.
But we ran through like probably 15 questions where we were just like 100% on board with one another. Like, no. It was great.
Yeah, and I think Danny and I, we kind of match up, and I was talking to Mr. Sue, or
Oh
boy
yeah,
named
Mr.
Sue
Sue.
now. Uh, he we did a collaboration. We're going to be doing a podcast series called. I plan on doing this. I don't want to overpromise anything because, like, I don't like setting myself up for failure. But a podcast that I'm kind of toying around the idea with is like a podcast series within Bro History called "Podcast That You Should Listen To."
Mm,
And I spoke to Mr. Sue, who's been a big supporter of the show, and
definitely.
I'm sure a lot of guys who listen to his show as well. We did kind of like a crossover thing, and what were we speaking about? Man, I forget the point that I was trying to make again.
You'll just have to listen.
You'll just have to listen. But let's see, where was I, man? In that weird rant. So yeah,
I guess that kind of falls under the line of like one of my last questions that I had for today's show. And that's like, what do you want to do in the future? What do you hope this show becomes? And like, what are some things that you might be interested in doing? And I'm sure we both have like ideas and opinions and stuff like that. So, you can start. So that would have been one of them. Like shows you should listen to would be a cool, like segment within Bro History where we talk to different podcasters that do different shows that we like.
Yeah, we want to do something like that. I think it would be cool to do more collaborated efforts. And so, what I plan on doing is that, I've been we've been experimenting with different types of content lately. I don't know if you could tell.
Mm-hmm.
We put out shorter episodes, we put out longer episodes, we put out and we're talking about
back episodes,
back to back
waited a little
episodes.
bit. Yeah.
So we're basically trying to figure out like what is the perfect recipe of episodes and all of that stuff, and what's people's favorite content and all of that kind of things that you would expect. So we're still kind of we're still experimenting with the podcast to kind of find that perfect recipe, which we probably never will. You always have to evolve the show as time goes on. But we are in the experimentation phase. Things I hope to do. So ultimately, the goal of this show, and what I want is that, I would love to just continue growing our audience. First of all, that's like the main thing that I want. And then I want to put us in a position where we have the resources to do like just a lot of content.
Like a lot of different types of shows. Yeah.
Yeah, a lot of different types of shows. So, things on politics, things on history, get more, awesome guests like we've had, do more analysis, just mix and match, mix and match. So that's kind of what we're hoping to do in the future, is just expand audience. 1, 2, get to a position where we can really like just start releasing a shitload of content. We already do release a shitload of content.
Yeah, like our pace is very high for new podcasters.
Yeah, we release a shitload of podcasts, but we want to get to a position where we're doing like, I don't know, like Joe Rogan style releases, where he releases like 4-hour podcasts a day or something like that.
Yeah,
That's ultimately the goal. Obviously, we are podcasting from over the internet with each other.
Mm-hmm.
So something that I really would love in the future, and we're striving for, is to get to a position where we can start like
get a little studio,
so we can like stop dealing with some of the just the faults of technology over the web.
Right.
That's a big thing. So.
And stop the damn sirens.
When you hear a damn siren come on in the background, because we both live in areas that are completely they're like, I live on an intersection next to a hospital. So I couldn't tell you a worse place to podcast than where my studio is. It's quite funny how many times, like, what we have to do to like get the sirens and the shit out of the if you saw the things that we had to do to get the sirens out, you would be like, holy shit. Yeah. That's so annoying.
Yeah.
We have to like mute ourselves. We have to like give hand signals, or like,
we're like recording on 4 different platforms at the same time. Like we're doing all kinds of stuff.
It will be, and then there'll be like, there will be fights outside my place. They'll be like, yo, fuck you, man. Fuck you. Yo, man, you want to step up? Like that will happen outside.
I've got 2 bars across the street from my place, and my room faces the street. So it's like I get my fair share of shit too.
Yeah, we both get our fair shit of sirens. Yeah, Danny's near stuff. You're Brooklyn. I'm in Harlem. Yeah, basically in Harlem.
Basically Harlem. Yeah.
Like upper. I don't want these fuckers to find me and kill me. But yeah, that's what we have in the future. Just release more stuff. We're working on getting actually. Don't be surprised soon when you hear sponsors on the show. We're actually working on that. So people that will help us do this show, and obviously vetted ones that will offer amazing services for all of you people that we respect. And then, yeah, that's basically the main goal, to put out good media that's honest. Independent media is difficult, mainly because we don't sensationalize stuff that much. Maybe we do. Yeah, there's kind of a tad of it, but we don't sensationalize things over the top like a lot of people do. So we're going the route where we have to earn every single listener, and we have to convince every listener of ours to continue listening to our show, despite us having very nuanced opinions and having, for example, I'll just say one more thing about one of the challenges. So someone will tune into an episode, and maybe in that particular subject will be totally like, I don't know, we'll agree with Donald Trump on something, and we'll be like, yeah, Trump did a good job on this. It was great. Like, we both agree that Trump did a good job on it. And we'll take it like that. And then we'll go into like something else that's not so bipartisan. And then people will hear another episode that we do where we're shitting on Trump because of something that we disagree with.
Right.
That's because, again, the AB basic bitch tribalism mentality, we don't have that on the show. It's not what we're about. We don't I hate that mentality. I like collaborating with people from different political perspectives, and we both have different political perspectives on each topic. So I'll just give people fair warning on this show. If you can't handle nuance, then I don't know what to tell you. The show might not be for you. For people who can handle nuance and want to hear different opinions and don't want a circle jerk of like, oh, I agree with you on liberals, or I agree with you on Trump being bad man orange, then if you're not looking for that, then this is the show for you.
Yeah.
Because we got plenty of new guests lined up that are going to be completely different from political perspectives and what they offer. So you got to be able, to handle it. I understand how painful it is sometimes to hear something you disagree with, but we're not doing it as like an insult to your political affiliation. We're doing it just because that's our perspective. So
and we're just bursting the bubbles a little bit. That's all.
Not bursting the bubbles. We're just fucking talking our opinions, and that's it, I guess. Yeah. So.
Yeah, I guess we could wrap this one up. I think, once again, I want to thank everybody that's been listening, for the past almost year, for the past 100 episodes. Keep your eyes out and your ears out for, some episodes coming up. We might be doing a little bit more recycling, for some older episodes that our new fans might not have heard before. We'll be getting to work on some awesome new projects and guests like Henry had mentioned. In August, we're coming up on our 1 year. We might be getting a couple of sponsors that'll be offering some awesome stuff to you guys. I want to point out, just if you like the show and you really want to support us, the best ways to do that is to go on iTunes, give us a rating, leave us some comments, leave us some reviews. If you're on YouTube, hit that thumbs up button, talk in the comment section. Let us know what you guys want to hear about. And if you really, really like the show, we do have a Patreon, where you can go and support, where we've got some exclusive content. I mentioned one piece on there about, how we took the test together. That's a really fun one. And generally speaking, honestly, word of mouth goes a long way too. If you like the show, tell a friend. Let them know that you like this one show and you want them to take a listen.
Yeah. Patreon is a great way. Rating and reviewing is honestly the most is like just a very easy, modest way to support the show. Ratings really go a long way. And we're planning on doing more. Basically on our Patreon, we have usually anywhere from from 20 minutes to like an hour of additional content on episodes.
For like every episode, yeah.
For every episode. And usually it's just like, we're not in podcast form. We're like in more casual form, and we're just going over episodes, going over topics, going over more taboo opinions that we may have that we probably wouldn't want to release to the public, and just additional fun, cool content. We want to, set up a base for that. And I encourage you to do it. Release content. We have it at $3 a month for basically all the exclusive stuff that you want, or you can do it for $1, whatever you guys feel like or think is fair. And let us know what you think is fair as well. We're trying to build this thing up. We're still kind of new to Patreon, so we're doing our best to make it a good incentive for you guys to join. All right, so should we wrap it up?
Yeah, man.
We're over an hour. I think we'll let these young gentlemen or young people, young ladies as well, go on with their day. Guys, thank you so much for joining another episode of Bro History. Your support and your listens and your attention it means the world to us. And we will continue as we go on to our next 100 episodes to improve the content, make it a better show, and entertain your mind, give you some brain gasms. All right. Any last words, Daniel? Any last words?
One of our first couple episodes of podcasts, we would always say, don't get high on your own supply at the end. So let's end it that way.
Oh, yeah. Don't get high on your own supply.
Peace.
Peace.